don't think she's the right person for Chidi. It's... I'm sorry,
Victoria's deeply concerned about her brother. She's overwhelmed at the prospect of what his life might be like if he takes her back. So, with Renee desperately trying to win him back, which way will Chidi go?
It is hard to consider that we might not end up together after 5 years. Yeah.
The poor guy is in turmoil here. He's desperately, frantically torn about this decision. Will he listen to his friends and family and ditch her for good? Or will he follow his heart and take her back? Well, before we get to that, let's rewind to the start. So we left the pair after a huge argument that had Renee frothing at the mouth. Why? Well, she was convinced that Chidi and his family were somehow against her, which just wasn't the case. But the end result was Renee breaking up with Chidi and then leaving Victoria's house. And it's in her hotel room alone by herself cursing Chidi that we join her in this episode.
I always thought that nothing could ever come between us, but he let his ways and his false faith come between, and that's where we're sitting. I believe, honestly, this is the end of our relationship.
It's interesting watching Renee flicker back and forth between how much she loves Chidi and how let down and rejected she feels by him for not being here with her, for not picking her instead of his family. Now, while we all know by now that her mocking his faith is nothing new, it's a deeply held belief that she has, I also get the impression it's a defense mechanism here. She's using that as the scapegoat for why he's not with her, rather than looking inward at her own actions. But notably, she does express some remorse. She does say that she wishes they'd never fought so that he could be by her side. So, in the cold light of day, what's preventing Renee from going tail between her legs and apologising to Chidi and his family? Well, unfortunately, it seems like Renee has a lot of past trauma that's dictating her actions today.
When I was about 3 months pregnant, Lexi's father literally just one night just gave me a hug goodbye and never, ever came back.
Renee explains how she was abandoned at her time of need by her daughter's father, and then the subsequent men in her life were no better. I dated drug addicts and all sorts of problematic guys, she says. That's why I thought the love I had with Chidi was different. It was the first time I felt real love, she explains, and that is why when Chidi refused to come to the hotel with me, I felt rejected again. It felt like history repeating itself.
But since I've gotten here, he's continuously rejected me or let me down in many ways. I'm so confused, like ever since last night I feel numb.
It's really sad that she feels this way because it's just not true. It's not. This is her trauma talking. Chidi hasn't rejected her. He hasn't let her down. This is just a narrative, a story that she's telling herself. Now, she tells us she hasn't yet left Nigeria. She's sticking around because spiritually, something's telling her to stay. But is that something, is that spiritual voice in her head actually reflecting reality? Well, when we catch up with Chidi, it turns out he's been doing a lot of reflecting.
My actions and decisions contributed to her frustration, but at the same time, her lack of respect for my family is unacceptable.
Chidi's emotionally intelligent and empathetic enough to realise his actions have played a role in this. His decision to be celibate and not tell her he intends to be celibate until she arrived in Nigeria have massively impacted Renee and the way that she's acting. But that doesn't mean that he can just accept it. He can't ever accept the way that she treated his family. Like, the amount of respect that Chidi has for his sister and brother-in-law is clear for all to see. Take, for example, the way he addresses them. When he walks into their bedroom, the bedroom that they kindly gave up for Renee to stay in, and he finds them both sitting on the bed waiting for him, he addresses them as ma'am and sir. Like, that's his sister and brother-in-law he's talking to. That's the level of reverence, respect that he has for them. How can a guy like that accept the way that Renee speaks to them? He can't. It's impossible. And it's for that reason that his brother-in-law, Bernard, asks him, where do you stand with Renee right now? Tell me you don't intend to take her back, he asks.
I don't think it's a matter of if I want her back, because that's my utmost desire.
The disappointment on both of their faces is so obvious that it's a good thing Chidi can't see their reactions. Now, while he remains diplomatic, Bernard is honest with Chidi. He literally says to him, I don't understand why you'd put yourself through this kind of relationship. And, of course, Victoria's face echoes that same sentiment. So why is Chidi refusing to give up on her? Well, because of her past.
When she told me, I promised her that I will always
be there for her.
Yes, be there for her. Because I lost my sight, I know how it feels.
Chidi explains that his love for Renee isn't just romantic, but it's also compassionate. And it's that compassion that he himself has also experienced. That's what helped to lift my spirits when I was at my lowest, he says. I want to do the same for her. But Chidi, for as lovely as that sentiment is, his sister reminds him he also needs to be realistic. That same approach might not work on Renee, especially considering Renee has a very peculiar chip on her shoulder.
There is this war mentality that she has. Yeah. Is you and me are a team against her. So she doesn't believe in this harmony. Are you willing to give up your family?
Look, Renee doesn't believe in family the same way that Chidi does. Maybe that's to do with her upbringing, perhaps it's a cultural thing, or maybe it's just her life experiences. But whatever it is, it's in direct opposition to each other. Like, what Chidi sees as his sister loving and checking in on him, Renee sees as pestering interference. Chidi is eternally grateful for his sister. Renee views her as the enemy. It's very difficult to see any middle ground there. And what this now means is it's left Chidi in a position where he has to choose one over the other. And that's a choice that's clearly deeply affecting everyone.
I don't think she's the right person for Chidi. I'm sorry,
There's nothing more certain in life than death, taxes, and the fact that Chidi's sister loves him. Everyone can see it with their own eyes. She's so worried about the direction that Chidi's life might take if he chooses Renee. But despite those fears, she loves him enough to let him make his own decisions.
If you don't want me to get in your way, of course I don't want to get in your way. I will step aside because I've seen how important she is to you.
Yeah, that is real love, isn't it? It's the purest version of love. It's a love that says, I think you're doing the wrong thing. I know you're doing the wrong thing, but I love you enough not to try and change you. Yeah, not to try and change you. That's very different to Renee's approach, isn't it? Renee's determined to change Chidi, but Victoria couldn't be more different to Renee if she tried.
I'm not asking you to choose me over her. Never. Chidi needs love. That wouldn't deny him that, so I would rather let him go and experience it.
Yeah, you've got to ask yourself, is what Renee is even offering Chidi actually love? I don't think it is. What Renee seems to feel for Chidi is some sort of weird obsession. This is a lady who thinks the universe brought their souls together, but that their love is dependent on Chidi doing everything that she demands of him, otherwise he doesn't really love her. Yeah, that's an unhinged, it's a scary kind of love, if you can even call it love.
Washing my pink shirt that I arrived in. That one's sweaty. I'll always save these clothes from the day I first hugged Chidi. My sock smells good.
Renee's a peculiar lady, isn't she? Now, she's been waiting in her hotel room alone for 2 days in the hopes that Chidi might just show up and surprise her. She tells us they have been in contact, they have been texting each other, but with no apology forthcoming to him or his family, Chidi hasn't shown up. And with every day that passes that he doesn't show, Renee feels that sense of rejection again and again.
Okay, I figure out why you don't like me so much. I love him with everything, and there was something holding me back, but now I'm starting to feel like I'm ready to go home.
Sorry, but there's something very wrong if Renee honestly can't work out why Chidi is mad. I don't know why he doesn't love me. Why does he treat me this way? I love him with all of my heart, she tells us. But while Renee dwells in her self-pity in her own little world, Chidi has gone to meet his old friend Christian to get some third-party advice. Chidi tells his friend that Renee's visit has been far from perfect, and this fight in particular has been the worst of the worst. And it really doesn't take long before Christian reveals where he stands on Renee.
I can't actually say why he loves Renee. She says certain things that are very strange. Like sometimes she talks about demons, she says scary things.
Yeah, it's no surprise that Renee's wild outbursts scare religious people, including Chidi and Christian. Like, can you just picture that scene? What would a conversation between Chidi and Renee about demons look like? I'm picturing Renee, eyes bulging, her head slightly tilted, angry like she was the other night. It's the sort of look that would make someone call an exorcist. So naturally, no wonder Chidi is a little scared.
But I never forget the emotions that overwhelmed me by the things she said. She said a whole lot of horrible things.
And to think, right, Chidi couldn't even see Renee. He couldn't see how unhinged she looked. He felt that way from her voice alone. But that raises another point. Chidi's told us in the past that loud noises can overwhelm him physically and mentally. They cause him to experience vertigo and disorientation. And as a partially blind man himself, Christian understands this better than most. So if that's what she does to you, if that's how she acts, how would you be able to deal with that on a constant basis? Christian asks Chidi.
You know your condition. Do you think he can cope? Do you think he can cope with her temperament?
Chidi's stressed out, and we all know the reason why. We all know he can't cope with that. Chidi's a very calm person, right? He needs that serenity. But Renee couldn't be further away from that if she tried. Her entire personality is combative. She has a very me against the world attitude. And Chidi actually admits this is something he doesn't think he'll ever be able to change.
She yells and shouts and easily get angry. And considering my condition, honestly, I don't think I can put up with that.
Chidi has finally admitted the truth. A life with Renee will literally mean constant pain, physical and mental. But no sooner does he admit this than he tries to correct himself. He checks himself. He tells us how he's so confused about what to do because he loves her that much. And it's left to Christian to give Chidi some much needed honesty. Because sometimes love, if that's even what they share, sometimes love just isn't enough.
You understand? You know it's not working.
It's not really working.
So if it's not working, we'll be honest with her.
You think it's that easy?
I know it's not.
Someone you love?
No one said that this would be easy, and Christian tells Chidi that if he truly loves Renee, he needs to let her go. That's just what's best for the both of them, he says. Now, for as cliched as that might sound, on this occasion, it is true. It makes no sense to go through with this. Why get stuck in a miserable life, a life of pain, when we all know it's not going to work out?
It is hard to consider that we might not end up together after 5 years. Yeah.
Look, it's tough to see Chidi like this with this level of emotional turmoil, but that doesn't mean it's not for the best. Just because you've been together for 5 years long distance, that's not a good enough reason to handcuff yourself to her for the rest of your life, particularly if you're unhappy. It's the old sunk cost fallacy, isn't it? But as Chidi slowly comes to terms with this, as he messages Renee to ask to meet her later on that evening, it becomes painfully apparent that the two of them are on different pages, very different pages. You see, while Chidi is thinking about ending things, Renee, on the other hand, has got a bit overexcited. She's dressed up in some new nightwear that she's just purchased.
It's very silky, it's real soft, and I bought that obviously with Chidi in mind, thinking that if he touched it, he would love it.
And while unfortunately the episode ends there, that's all we're treated to for now. Just that short snippet alone proves that Renee has learned nothing from this experience. She's clearly hoping that she'll be able to seduce Chidi, isn't she? Like, if she's hoping that Chidi's going to be rubbing her body like that, she really doesn't respect his vow of celibacy at all, does she? Yeah, there's no respect here. These two are so wrong for each other, and I can't wait to see how batshit insane Renee will get when, inevitably, Chidi rejects her again next time.